Let's proceed now with my next installment of another Across Canada by Story, based upon Doug Gibson's Across Canada by Story. Here we are at Digby, Nova Scotia. Digby is supposedly famous for its scallops. Wow, were we disappointed. Our serving resembled tasteless cardboard. Flora MacDonald was awarded the Scot of the Year title on April the 7th, 2009. This photo was taken by her sister Sheila. Years earlier, as Conservative representative for Kingston and the Isles, she was a guest speaker at the Kiwanis Club of West Toronto. As I walked up to her in the reception line, she immediately recognized my Ross-ter tie. I believe that she would have made an excellent Prime Minister. On page 241 you say it's up to an author to behave as his own publicist. Well, if you insist. Here is my education in Oshawa from settlement to city. Dewey Decimal ID 370.971.355R. Published by Alger Press in Oshawa by the school board in 1970. I asked for no royalties, and the price was kept at $5. My Google search indicates that the book can sell anywhere from $46.34 Canadian to $49.97 US in 2017. Stephen Saywell, the chairman of the Board of Education at the time and one of my greatest supporters, suggested that on page 135 of that book I should change the word chirography to calligraphy. In a rush and without much thought, I agreed. The word, however, was in a quotation taken directly from one of Oshawa's early newspapers and should not have been altered. Another book, Our Ross Family Story, Dewey Decimal ID 929.271.R733, was published by North York Offset at my own expense in 1978, and all of the 100 copies of the manuscript were sold by subscription. My Enigma machine, 100 sets of a dozen rebus puzzles each, actually more than 1,200 puzzles with examples, was never published unless you count the 3 times that they appeared on Alistair McIntyre's Electric Scotland website by popular demand. I can recall an old family saying, "Wherever a McGregor sits is the head of the table." On December 3rd, 2015, I completed the 3rd edition of the McGregor story in order to update the original work by Henry Ward. Maybe you'll recall my collection of words in search of a title, back in the preface. Well, it now has Tattle Creek Tales as a title, but it still remains a work in progress. The tide was still out when we arrived in Alma on the shore of the Bay of Fundy, and the Fundy sands were still red, and the waters of the bay were still blue, and the great wedge of Blomidon still stretched into the bay. Time was on our side on August the 18th, 1992, as we drove to the Cape Hopewell Provincial Park. We were able to descend the stairs to the beach where the water had carved the rocks into amazing patterns. Here from Halifax is the great Gaelic bard Lewis MacKinnon, a short, smiling fellow shaped like a barrel of the best Scotch whisky. Lewis was awarded the Scot of the Year title by the Scottish Studies Foundation in April of 2013. He is the self-declared head of the Dead Language Poets Society. Ah yes, we've been to Cape Breton Island twice. On a trip east, we drove north as far as Cape Smoky, where I prepared a barbecue lunch before deciding to return to the mainland, since the drive down the west side might have taken us the better part of the night. Our second trip was in July of 2008, and our Sunday adventure, following a visit to the Alexander Graham Bell Museum, involved a cruise from Badek Bay on a schooner. The captain had a frozen fish, which he waved to catch the attention of a bald eagle in the area. Upon our return to shore, our Ontario Commissioner asked me to take a photo of the location where the Silver Dart was flown during the winter, February 23, 1909. That was the first airplane flight in Canada. Local folks say that the bay hasn't frozen over completely during recent years. Before we left Cape Breton Island, we visited St. Anne's Gaelic College. The language remains very much alive there, as noted again on page 281. I became a member of the Order of Good Cheer when we visited Port Royal on our first trip east in 1992 and stopped at the site of Champlain's Fort. Ferries are central to life in this part of the world. My wife and I took the Blue Nose Ferry from Yarmouth to Bar Harbor. My photo of the tail of a humpback whale was actually taken near Ketchikan, Alaska, but I did manage to spot a right whale south of Nova Scotia at the mouth of the Bay of Fundy on August 22, 1992. Its eyes were as large as dinner plates. Doug Gibson wrote, "I never met a Newfoundlander I didn't like. Remember the nurse who dropped my prized Inuit sculpture of the bears? Right on." Scot of the Year for 2006, Jean Watson of Lower Sackville near Halifax, Nova Scotia, is known as the Mother of Tartan Day. Here she is shown with my wife at Casa Loma. Tartan Day began with a proposal on March the 9th, 1986, which was supported by the Federation of Scottish Clans. Since that time, Tartan Day has been embraced by persons of Scottish descent worldwide. April 6th in Scotland was the date of the signing of the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320. We should acknowledge Farley Mowat as the father of creative non-fiction. His friend Silver Donald Cameron is too kind, particularly pertaining to his experiences with wolves. One of his admirers, named Charlie, was responsible in large measure for the phrase, "Chuck you, Farley." Someday I'll include this story in my collection of Gullible's Troubles. Farley often created an illusion of reality, just as my wife and son were never truly in a cage with a tiger on July 17, 2010, after Doug Fruin's magic show in Niagara Falls. On the same page of Across Canada by Story, Doug notes that Ken McCougan, in How the Scots Invented Canada, writes that Farley created his real-life narrative by using techniques more associated with fiction. For some reason, I kept a Toronto Daily Star clipping from Sunday, October 31st, 2010, of a Canadiana book review of How the Scots Invented Canada. This book, with 19 chapters, is split into 3 sections: the pioneers, the builders, and the visionaries. It was published by HarperCollins in 1910. The same article mentions the book by American writer Arthur Herman, How the Scots Invented the World, the true story of how Western Europe's poorest nation created our world and everything in it, which was published by Three Rivers Press on September 24, 2002. Onward, here is Doug Gibson's final paragraph in the acknowledgments for the book. As for June, my lovely and talented assistant, techie, travel planner, fellow traveler, driver, dresser, gentle critic, and fond companion, words fail. But it's all been such fun. We've got to keep doing this. Doug's fans certainly hope so. Here are Doug and June at the Arts and Letters Club on May 13, 2016, when Doug accepted the Scott of the Year Award on behalf of Alice Munro. We are fortunate to have a photo of Alice Munro thanking Doug Gibson at Casa Loma on April 5, 2005, when he was selected to receive the Scott of the Year Award. Thank you, Doug, for an entertaining and stimulating story. As for my wife Patricia, my own lovely and talented assistant, gentle critic, and fond companion, words are insufficient. This project has been fun for me, and I would enjoy a sequel. The other Doug.